Hello, everyone. Welcome to Plastic Bank's webinar today. We've got some exciting topics to cover, and this is one in a series of webinars that we're doing on Laudato Si and about the environment. Today, we're focusing on don't waste Laudato Si. And before we get into specifics about the agenda today, I'd like to just point out a couple of functional things. If you're new to GoToWebinar, there is a section on the right-hand side there that says questions. So at any point during our presentations, you can write in your questions there, and towards the end of the webinar, both Peter and myself will read those questions and answer them. So feel free to interact with us there through that functionality. Now, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ryan Thomas. I'm an advisor to Plastic Bank. And with us, we also have Peter. Peter, do you want to maybe introduce yourself, say a little bit about Plastic Bank and the FAITH program?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter, and I'm here based in Germany. I'm with the Plastic Bank for 3.5 years. I'm the FAITH program specialist. I was first the Philippine manager for a while, and now based here in Germany and started the FAITH program. It is about engaging faith communities to become stewards of creation by revealing the value of plastic and empower people to change their lives.
Thank you, Peter. And so today we're going to talk about Laudato Si. I'll speak a little bit about what it is, the connection between faith and plastic. What exactly is Plastic Bank doing to respond to the crisis that we're living with regards to the planet and the environmental impact specifically of plastic on our environment and our lives? We'll take a look at the connection between spirituality and the ruptures in the relationships between humanity, God, and in creation. We'll look at plastic itself. What are some of the advantages of plastics, but also what do we need to be mindful of when we come into contact with plastic, when we are using plastic, when we're discerning how much plastic we need in our lives. And then we'll speak a little bit about the regenerative approach for an integral ecology and that impact on human renewal. Then we'll move into those implications on politics, the economy, and how that ultimately affects our personal behavior and our own responsibility. Peter will discuss Laudato Si and the plastic crisis and some of the things that, some of the partnerships that we have established with faith programs around the world, including the Vatican. And then we'll take your questions. We'll talk practically about how people of faith can step up and how Plastic Bank is supporting that. So like I said, at any point during the webinar, if you have a question, use that right-hand interface there, and you can put a question in there, and Peter and I will entertain those at the end of the webinar. So what is Laudato Si? Laudato Si is actually a phrase in Italian, and it's the name of an encyclical, which is a teaching document that the Pope releases to inform and to call the Catholic faithful to holiness. And so Laudato Si is actually a phrase. Typically encyclicals have been named in Latin. There's actually one encyclical, Peter, who's in Germany. There's one encyclical with a name in German, and this was written in 1939 by Pope Pius the 10th, denouncing Nazism. But 99.9% of encyclicals have a Latin name. So why is this one in Italian? Well, this phrase Laudato Si actually comes from a 12th century poem written by Saint Francis of Assisi. And this poem is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, documents that we have of Italian. If you'll remember, Italian evolved out of Latin. And so this Italian became the language, the common language in the Roman Empire, probably around the 13th century. So this is 12th century, this is early Italian. And this poem that St. Francis wrote is actually called the Canticle of the Sun. And I'm going to just read a little bit from that canticle because it's quite beautiful. So Laudato Si means praised be you. So a section here that I want to share with you. Praised be you, my Lord, through sister moon and the stars. In heaven you form them clear and precious and beautiful. Praised be you, my Lord, through brother wind and through the air, cloudy and serene, in every kind of weather through which you give sustenance to your creatures. Praise be you, my Lord, through sister water, which is very useful and humble and precious and chaste. Praise be you, my Lord, through brother fire, through whom you light the night, and he is beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praise be you, my Lord, through sister mother earth, who sustains us and governs us, and who produces varied fruits and with colored flowers and herbs. Praise be you, my Lord, through those who give pardon for your love and bear infirmity and tribulation. So here we have this beautiful canticle in which St. Francis of Assisi, who you'll often find a statue of in gardens with nature, with the animals surrounding him. And this is a beautiful poem essentially recognizing the beauty of creation and how creation really is a reflection of the Creator. And so we can see God in creation. And St. Francis developed some theology really around this stewardship that we have. We are ministers. We have a responsibility. We have a duty to steward and bring creation to perfection. Not to abuse it, but rather to bring it to perfection. And so this encyclical, Laudato Si, focuses on the care, what Pope Francis calls care for our common home. And so as inhabitants of Earth, this is our home, right? We look around the solar system and we see uninhabitable planets. We would have to transform the moon, transform the planet of Mars, perhaps. These are hostile places, and we have been given of this home here. And so Pope Francis lays out this encyclical, this teaching, where he highlights our responsibility, both from a scientific perspective and from a scriptural perspective. What does God give humanity as far as marching orders to perfect and care for creation? He also identifies poverty as a major issue for humanity to respond to. And how does that have to do with the environment? Well, when we abuse our resources, when we tear down and destroy our common home, that most affects the poor, those that do not have the resources to move, to be able to find a new place to live. So think about these neighborhoods, think about these cities, these areas that are adversely affected by pollution. And you'll see that the poor are the ones that cannot leave. The rich, they can move, they can go to a new place, they can seek out a virgin beach, a pristine part of the forest or jungle. The poor cannot. And so Pope Francis really highlights, and through looking at science and what social scientists are saying, and about the projections of where we're going if we stay on this path, and how that will adversely affect in a great degree the poor. He also looks at science and modernism, the role in which science can help, but also how science and technology can be turned against the human person. And so there's some very beautiful passages in here that are referenced from a priest who was actually, Peter, half German and half Italian, Father Romano Guardini, who was very skeptical. He wrote about 80 years ago, and he was very skeptical about the path that we were going and how we were putting so much faith and hope in technology to solve our problems and not taking on the personal responsibility. So this is an overview really of what Laudato Si is. Now I want to let Peter speak a little bit about, a little more in depth about the connection between faith and plastic and how Plastic Bank is responding.
Well, thanks, Ryan. That was a wonderful introduction to Laudato Si, and thank you also for sharing the Canticle of Francis of Assisi. It's one of my favorite prayers, so to say, and it's very powerful and has not stopped to be relevant. And if you ask me, Laudato Si is probably one of the most relevant literature that the church has brought out, and I think it puts the church and Christianity right back into the discussion of what matters most for us today and for the generations to come. And if we talk about plastic, plastic has two issues. In one way, plastic is a very powerful material because it's cheap, it's easy to produce, it's very durable, so it's very practical, but it doesn't decompose. And so if it's not disposed properly, it can be a mess. And we see that everywhere. If you look into the ocean, that is where it gets stuck. And even what you talk also about the poor is that actually the poor are most affected by the plastic pollution as well, and even people are getting sick and dying because of plastic pollution in their places, and so it is one of the most pressing issues that humanity is facing right now. And what I'm always saying is, what connects all faith, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, is that you're using plastic. And so, but all religions have teachings about caring for nature, caring for earth, being good stewards. And so all religions, all people of faith also are part of the solution, if only people are aware, if only people are mindful, and also if people have avenues where they can solve the issue. Because if you give people awareness, but you don't give them the tools to solve the problem, you only do 50% of the job, right? You need to do both. if you give them awareness, you also give them the tools, and that is where Plastic Bank comes in. Plastic Bank is a social enterprise that was founded 7 years ago by David Katz and Sean Frankson in Vancouver, now working in the Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, Egypt, and Haiti, and have collected about 11 million kilos of plastic in about 300 collection points. And the idea is to create a fair trade plastic, so to say what we call social plastic, where the poor have a chance or an opportunity that by selling plastic, they can work themselves out of poverty and and even get access to other services like education, health insurance, microloans, internet, mobile banking, and all those kind of things to improve their lives. And so it's also the issue that in those countries where we are, the church is very present. Like the Philippines, you have 85% Catholics, you have about 10% Protestants. In Brazil, you have about 60% Catholics, you have about 35% Protestants. So if all those Christians and all those churches start to become steward of creation, it will have a severe impact. Imagine Brazil. Brazil is the fourth biggest plastic producer of the planet, but only 3% of that plastic is being recycled. Most of it ends up in the rivers. You know that in Rio de Janeiro during the Olympics, they had to cancel sports events at the sea because of the plastic pollution, you know? It's terrible. So the church and the Christians have a incredible opportunity to have an incredible impact to stop this plastic pollution, and that is what Plastic Bank is providing with. We have created that program, and we'll talk about later, but that is actually, I think, where Laudato Si and Plastic Bank comes together, right? But it goes actually also deeper, right, Ryan? We talked about those ruptures about in our relationship with God and people that actually are causing this crisis. And it would be great if you could share a few minutes what that means actually, that condition that humanity has put itself into. For some reason, you're on mute, Ryan.
Thank you, Peter. That reason was because I put myself on mute there. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So in the Judeo-Christian scriptures, we see that in Genesis, God creates man and woman, and he creates them in a paradise. It's not a perfect, complete paradise. And this is the role of humanity, man and woman, to cooperate with God's love, to utilize their free will in a way that allows them to make choices between what's good and what's best for them. This is before sin enters the world. So our freedom, correctly understood, is between a choice between good and best, not good and bad, but good and best. And so as God brings before man and woman all of the creatures of the world, this is a significant moment in the history of humanity. And this is what we understand as an analogy, right? So what is the purpose of this moment where God is bringing the animals and the creatures and the plants and has man name them? Well, the Jewish understanding of giving a name means that we have a responsibility over that creation. And they understood that a name also identified the creation, the creature, with an identity and a mission. And this was true even for people. So my name, Ryan, has a meaning. It's Gaelic for young king. And so you would name your children after some reflection, after some prayer and discernment of seeing what is their mission, what is their purpose in the world. And so God gives this responsibility to humanity over creation, to perfect creation, okay? Now what happens? What happens is one of the creation, the serpent, who really was the evil one, the devil, begins to dialogue with Eve. So the serpent plants this idea that the only tree, the only fruit that Adam and Eve are prevented from consuming is actually the fruit that will make them like gods. Okay, and so this idea enters their mind of power, right? And in reality, God created the man and woman in his own image and likeness to be perfected, to be elevated, to be joined towards him. So this is a lie that the serpent plants in the mind of Adam and Eve. And what happens is when Eve consumes the fruit, sin, there's a rupture. Sin causes a rupture. Sin is a rejection of God's love. So she rejects all of the promises God has given her and says yes to an alternative plan. And what's the first thing that happens after there's a rupture between Eve and God? She takes the fruit and she gives it to Adam. This is significant because this is also a consequence of sin. After we have a rupture with God, we then create a rupture with our brothers and sisters. So we spread this break with God and we give it to somebody else. And so then Adam consumes it. And when God confronts them, he sees that they are hiding. The experience of sin causes shame in us because we know that we've turned away from the good. We've turned away from love. And when asked why Adam consumed the fruit, he blames Eve. He doesn't take personal responsibility. So we see this spiral in the consequences of sin. Now, the next consequence, first rupture between humanity, the human person, and God, then between people, right? Because Eve shares her sin with Adam. Adam, in effect, blames Eve. He doesn't take personal responsibility. And now creation turns against humanity, right? All of a sudden, the human person sees creation as a threat. And so we live with this experience even today. Every single act of sin, rejecting God's love, follows the same archetype. And we find ourselves in a situation in which we are trying to tame creation. But ultimately, we are, in many cases, abusing it. So we'll talk here in a moment after Peter shares a little bit of the advantages of plastic and its downfalls. And I'll share with you how we can actually move into a situation in which we are reconciling with creation and thereby reconciling with our brothers and sisters and with God.
Thank you, Ryan, for sharing this. And we can see that the relationships in our world are broken. And I think even this COVID crisis has shown that in so many ways, how broken our world is on so many levels, like interpersonal relationships about different social groups, and also our relationship with creation or nature, so to say. And of course, it encompasses all of human life, and that means that the things that we produce are part of that. And like what I already said before, that plastic, which started to become popular maybe in the last 20 years, has really made a career that is unbelievable in the history of manufacturing. So that we are producing hundreds of millions of tons of plastic every year, and plastic has replaced so many materials. If you look into car manufacturing, 25% of our cars are made out of plastic. You mean all the beverages we buy, almost now all come in plastic containers. Food in the supermarket, if you go there, everything is packaged in plastic. So you almost can't escape plastic, because plastic has so many good attributes. As what I said, it keeps things durable, it makes it lightweight, and so on. And with the growth of population, it is to be expected that plastic manufacturing will skyrocket over the next 25 years. And that means also we have really to give great attention on how we deal with this plastic. So there are, of course, people saying we should totally ban plastic, and there are advantages to that, and there are valid points to that. But I think in our society, and also I think it's probably unrealistic to say that plastic will totally disappear from our lives. But what we have to do is to be aware of the consequences. If we don't change, right, what we see is that till 2050, plastic will have the same volume of fish in the ocean if we don't continue. That we have a problem with microplastic, as that comes in different forms through our fibers, through plastic that is being destroyed by the elements in the water and then becomes so small. About 1 million birds and are killed by plastic every year. About 100,000 ocean mammals are dying because they can't see plastic and shrimps, so they get everything in, and then it totally messes up their digestive system, and then they die. It's really a tragedy, and probably nobody saw it coming or intended that to be, but it's something that we have to deal with, that we can't blame, like Adam, we can't blame anybody else and say, oh, it's their fault, and people are trying to blame each other. We have all to take responsibility for it, whether it's government, whether it's industry, whether it's a consumer, whether it's the company selling the items. I think full of society has to take responsibility for it. And also one thing that we see is the plastic that goes from the ocean comes from basically for a couple of nations who are mostly in Asia, which is China, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam, India, Thailand, Brazil, which is outside of Asia. Like Egypt is the biggest one in Africa, in the Mediterranean Sea. But then we cannot say, well, that is their problem. If you look at the Western world, like Germany has the highest per head consumption of plastic packaging in the world, or almost one of the highest, so and a lot of that plastic is being exported as well. So we are they are not helping. They are not helping to solve the problem that we are addressing right now. And so we need to find ways to have appropriate way to deal with the situation. But I think strategies or issues or tactics or policies are one thing, but I think it needs to start within us, right? In our spirituality, in our relationship with God and with His creation. And I think, Ryan, that would be something you would like to share about what the Pope writes, eco-conversion or integral ecology. And I think those are things that really hit the heart of the issue. And I would like you to explore those a bit with us, could you?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So when we talk as speaking from a Christian perspective, I think a lot of Christians over the last 20 or 30 years have been a little bit skeptical of the environmental movement, and not without a certain reason. I think that a lot of the dialogue in the past has looked at humanity as if we were a parasite, and that's not the case. Our activities can be destructive, absolutely, and have been destructive towards the environment. But many of the approaches have been about reducing the population. And if we reduce the population, we will reduce the environmental impact. And that's short-sighted, and Pope Francis speaks about this. It's very short-sighted because it essentially treats human life as something disposable. So it's actually it's a continuation of the attitude and the ideology that got us here in the first place. It's just simply disposing of human lives, and in many cases, ideas of mass, birth control or access to abortion or even sterilization in poor developing countries have been proposed. And so what Pope Francis tries to do is make an argument that environmentalism, or rather the care for our common home, is a fundamental responsibility for the Judeo-Christian believers. And he looks at this, he proposes in this teaching document, he unites this idea of environmentalism with spirituality. Just as we spoke about earlier, the ruptures, we also spoke about responsibility, right? Adam was given stewardship, care over creation. And so this is a responsibility that we have inherited. And through a reconciliation with creation, we find ourselves learning to live a more coherent life. So when we are rejecting attitudes of consumerism, when we're rejecting attitudes of a culture, a throwaway culture, as Pope Francis calls it, where we buy and consume easily disposable things. This act of purchasing and using and then throwing away is an attitude that affects the soul. And we learn certain behaviors. And this is why we also apply the same approach when treating other people. And just as we looked at how sin has a tendency to replicate itself in the four relationships with the Creator, within ourselves, within our brothers and sisters, and with creation, the same thing can be said about how we treat each one of those relationships. So as we enter into a healthier relationship with our common home, with the earth, with the environment, with creation, we find that we are more attentive, we are more sensitive, our sensitivity to beauty, to harmony, all of these things elevate the soul. And so as we embrace that, we also find ourselves naturally, through that healing with creation, we now treat our spouses, our children, our friends, our brothers and sisters in a similar way. We recognize the beauty in them. We recognize the dignity and the worth in them. We don't throw away those relationships. We don't discard people and their feelings. Then we go to the next level here, which is within ourselves. So Pope Francis invites us to pray, to meditate, to reconcile ourselves. And so as we begin to heal our relationship with creation, as we begin to heal that relationship with our brothers and sisters, we find a need to treat ourselves with that dignity, to see the beauty that we were created in the image and likeness of God. And then that also heals our relationship with our own creator. Instead of seeing God as somebody who has created a world that is harsh, that is hostile, that is against us, that has so much suffering, we actually begin to use our eyes to see the blessings and the graces and the beauty that is in ourselves, within, again, our brothers and sisters, and within creation. So it's this beautiful top-down and bottom-up experience. Just a couple more points here on transitioning just a moment here into the implication on politics, the economy, and personal behavior. So as we reconcile these four ruptures, clearly we want others to experience the same type of reconciliation. And we begin to see the injustice in our world, the injustice in our judicial systems and in our crime and punishment systems, in our legal systems, in the economic structures that we have. What are we rewarding economically? And then the other question too is, how ought we to shape public policy? What are the minimum requirements, the minimum standards that we should apply in the communities in which we live? So there are many implications for that, and Pope Francis really invites people to recognize that we are all interconnected, that what our neighbor does in their own home ultimately does affect us too. And this is maybe a little bit of a controversial statement, but there is nothing totally hidden in our lives. Every action that we have is either an action of growth or is deconstructive. And that affects, again, all four of those relationships. So we're invited into this idea that we're interconnected in our relationships, in our policy, in our economics. And, I think this experience that we've had in the last several months here with the pandemic has shown us that we are all interconnected. And one maybe a little bit superficial example that I read this morning on an economic level, the COVID pandemic is spreading quite rapidly in Mexico. There are many deaths there, many new cases, and the Mexican government has begun to put even greater restrictions on working in factories, essential businesses. And one of those factories is Ford, and Ford produces engines in Mexico. And now they're going to reduce their work staff by an additional 50% to prevent the spread of COVID, which has implications on the United States and the factories that are working here. And so in consequence, they will now have to reduce the workforce here in the United States, shut down factories. And so there is a shared responsibility that we have, I think, that has awakened during this time of COVID. I think we've seen governments become more closed on each other. We've become more protectionist, but there are very real consequences to those types of actions. And so it's just a reminder that we live in 2020 in a time where all of our actions really are interconnected. And the decisions we make today have implications across borders. And so that's why it's even more important for us to see And Peter, maybe you can speak a little bit about what Plastic Bank is doing, creating circular economies.
I just had the same thought to talk about circular economy, because I think that is what the Pope is actually also driving at in the encyclical, that and that is, we see how God created the world. Actually, creation is circular and there is no waste. You know, it's like you have like a tree. It's growing from a seed in the ground, and then it dies, it decomposes, and it becomes new soil for a new tree. Or and you have in the tree, the tree takes CO2 and produces oxygen with it, and we are using the oxygen and we are producing CO2, carbon. So it's all circular, you know, and so the economy that we have created, which is a linear economy, or where you just produce, use, and dispose, that is actually a sinful way to, because it's not the way after how God designed economy to work. And so I think Laudato Si is telling us to get back to God's design of economy, you know. And so it's the same with plastic. If you think that worldwide only 9% of all the plastic that we produce is recycled, then, and we are producing more and more plastic out of crude oil, I think that is not the way it should be. So we need really an eco conversion, and look how to manage the plastic in a way that it is circular. And that means that the producers need to produce packaging or plastic material that are fully recyclable. A lot of the stuff that is out there is multi-layer or mixing with colors and different plastics mixed together. It's impossible to recycle, or uneconomical. It can be recycled, but it doesn't make sense economically. So the whole product design, the whole life cycle needs to be looked into at. And this is what Plastic Bank is really driving in places where you have lots of mismanaged plastic, because there is no infrastructure there, or it's informal, or people are not really can make a living by collecting plastic. Plastic Bank goes there and working with companies who have the same mindset, who have that eco conversion already in them and want to make a difference with their products, and are willing to pay more for getting plastic resin that makes an impact socially and ecologically. So having that relation with our neighbor, having that relation with the planet, and that is where Plastic Bank works. And that's what we're talking about, regeneration, that we are not just fixing what we have broken, but that we are restoring it, that we are giving back to nature. That is the vision of David Katz, and I think that is so much aligned with what the Pope wrote about. And I think that if people would understand that, you know, that it makes so much sense, right? And so maybe Ryan, you could, because you were actually in the faith program before I was there. You were one of the, you would say, one of the fathers. Maybe you could share a little bit about the history of how Plastic Bank, which is a secular company, got into that crazy idea to work with communities of faith.
Yeah, so thank you, Peter. How did we get into this idea? I met David Katz, the founder of Plastic Bank, for the first time on the floor of St. Peter's Basilica. And we met there for the World Day of Prayer for the Poor. And we had a beautiful celebration of Mass with Pope Francis. We were blessed to be in the front row there with him. And this started a conversation about Laudato Si. And I had sent David the encyclical, the teaching document, the week before. And he was really enlivened by this. Not being a Catholic himself, he was reading this document and he saw the intuitions that he had in many cases naturally come to. And that's one of the beauty of this document, is that it's a document for humanity, not just for Catholics. It looks at who is the human person, what are our desires. It looks at the culture, it looks at the economy, it identifies the challenges, it proposes concrete solutions. And with over 1 billion Catholics on this planet, we represent, about, about 15% of the world population on every continent, in every country, with churches and schools and hospitals and clinics all around the world serving our brothers and sisters. And David had the inspiration during that weekend that we were together, that every church, every school, every hospital should become a place in which people can embrace Laudato Si, in which we can embrace a reconciliation with creation that is coherent with the faith, that every church can be a plastic bank, a place to deposit plastic, a place to learn how to use the resources that we've been given in a way that advances humanity, that perfects us, that perfects the environment. And so it was a beautiful weekend in which we envisioned a future state of healing and of reconciliation. And out of that, Peter was brought on to put concrete, practical approaches into this vision. And so that's how we're here today.
Yeah, exactly. We started with a faith program in the middle of 2018, and we did some research. How could we engage communities of faith? And we have created training materials in the moment only for Christian communities. We have created a sermon manual for especially focus on the writing of the Catholic Church. We have another one that mainly focuses on the teaching of the Protestant Church. And then we have a fully fledged youth curriculum. We have 2 workbooks, and that helps churches to not only have the spirituality, because those first 3 I mentioned, they are laying out the theology or the spirituality that really where Christian leaders can teach the members the spirituality of being stewards of creation and being stewards of the plastic as well. So that is really put out. It has theology, science, and information about plastic in it. And then we have action tools that teach you how to organize your community, how to put together volunteers in the church to get into actions, how to do a waste audit in your faith community, that you know what kind of waste do you have, how much do you do it, then actual practical applications on how to recycle, how to reduce your plastic footprint, how to reduce waste, and how to set up a collection point in your church, how to connect to to the plastic ecosystem in your country. So all of that is there, and that can be downloaded online under plasticbank.com. Then you go under programs and faith, then you can enroll, and then you can go through about 30 minutes of videos that teach you about Plastic Bank and about the faith program step by step, and then you can go to get to the library where you can download everything. Actually, for those who are on GoToWebinar, you get that link in an email right by tomorrow. So we will send you the link, and then you can check it out and can put it actually into action just by yourself. So that is something that we have put a lot of effort and research and hard blood to develop. And in the countries where we work, in Brazil, Haiti, and the Philippines, we have staff on the ground who work with parishes and Christian groups to assist them even further. And we also working with groups in Egypt and Indonesia and looking at Islam. We are looking how can we create the same kind of training material, as there is an awakening also within the Muslim world with eco-Islam, eco-mosques, and so we are looking into that direction as well. So this is where we are at right now.
Now, Peter, we've got about 10 minutes here. I'm not able to see the questions. I don't know if any have come in on your side.
I have gotten 2 so far, but if you, Rob Turner has put in a question. I have one from Rob Sluka. He said, thank you for that, Ryan. I was so moved reading through the encyclica that came in very early when you were sharing about the encyclica. And then we have one from Christina from Brazil. She's asking in something in Portuguese, and I asked her to email me so I can yeah, here we go. Now I have better visibility on the questions. Rob Turner said he had no sound. So that was about 10 minutes ago. Rob, has that? Have that? I unmute you, Rob. No, I can't. Has that problem been resolved? Or otherwise, are there any other questions? Please, we still have about a few minutes more. If you have questions, please type them into the question question box. Okay, good. He got sound when I was talking about the training material, so Rob had sound again. Good. You missed it. Okay, Rob, I type in my email. Send me an email. I will send you the link about the material, and then you can, I will guide you where you can get the materials. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Okay. How do we connect to the UN environmental program? Thank you, Mary. Actually, I have been in last March. I've been to Kenya for the UNEA 4, and there was a side event by the group called Faith for Earth, which is the United Nations environmental program, Faith program, and so we are connected to them. Dr. Iyad is the leader, and we have presented actually the plastic bank at that site event, and so we are continuously engaging with the United Nations Environmental Program Faith Initiative. Okay, any other questions, please? UNEP has social media. Okay, Mary, it would be also good to connect. So if there are ways we can use the social media of the UNEP or be included in their social media as one of the initiatives, I would get in touch with you. Okay, Rob, Luca had to leave. Thank you, Rob, that you joined us. It was a pleasure. Oh, Christina wants to get in touch with Plastic Bank Brazil. That's wonderful. That's good. Okay, there's a UNEP Facebook page. We will check that out, Mary. Thank you for sharing that. Any more questions? How about our watchers on Facebook? We're also live streaming on Facebook. If you have any questions, just type them in the comment section, please. So we try to answer those as well. Okay. There are none anymore, so I think, yeah, there's a section. We'll be doing another webinar for Seasons of Creation. Yes, Rob, we are planning to do that. We are already connecting with certain speakers. We are trying to get some high-level presenters and panelists for the Season of Creation webinar, and we'll be announcing that. Soon. Okay, here is Marie Jose Roque. Plastic Bank is trying to reduce plastic use in the world. Yes, we are also doing that. If you go to our web page, we have a plastic footprint calculator. You can calculate how much plastic you are using, and then we have also lessons on how you can reduce plastic in the world. Yes, Rob, there's another. If our schools interested, yes, we are definitely like to work with schools. If you want to get us in touch, we would appreciate that. Then Peter, if you need help in Brazil, please let me know. That is Claudia. Okay, Claudia, I have your email. I will get in touch with you. Yeah. Thank you. I will put in our website here. That is plasticbank.com. I will send it to all, so you see it. Yes, and here's Mary again saying Kenya has a law against the use of plastic bags. So has also Rwanda, and I think Uganda. They're coming up more, and it actually is a good way to reduce plastic. But plastic bags are only one part. You know, you reduce plastic bags, but then you still have shampoo bottles, you have multi-layer sachets, you still have a lot of other stuff as well. So it needs actually a whole strategy, and still it needs recycling as well. But it's one important step, I would say, to reduce plastic bags. Ryan, anything that still comes into your mind when you listen to the questions? There's something you would like to share?
I'm just excited to hear so many people wanting to get involved. This is an urgent issue. One thing that we just referenced, but I think we can't speak enough about, is the consequences of the pandemic on the environment. Initially, people were saying, "Oh, the planet is healing itself because we were staying at home," but we've seen that that's not necessarily the case. Transportation has reduced, but the use of plastic has increased pretty significantly over the last several months. Think about, I had to fly the other day, and everything is packaged in plastic now for health reasons. So it's so much more important today than it was even 6 months ago to activate your schools, to activate your parishes, to establish plastic bank wherever you are, especially until we're able to get rid of this disease. So please recognize the urgency here, reach out to Peter, and let's figure out a way how we can work together and solve this very big crisis that we're facing.
Yeah, actually, Rob mentioned that also. He said that there are millions of throwaway masks, and that is really, really true. Actually, all that what you just shared, all that plastic waste that is now coming up because of the pandemic, and so that is something that really, that really needs a thought on minimizing the damage or even preventing any damage to the environment, and especially in countries where there is poor waste management systems, that could be really a big problem. So there's really still a lot of work to do. And also, Claudio, you're saying that all the purchases online that happening right now, also creating a flood of waste. Exactly, that is definitely true. And so there needs to be systems, and that's what we talked about, circular economy, that the whole life cycle is included. So when the package goes out and it arrives at the customer, then what is happening with the packaging, and is it everything in the package fully recyclable, and is there a recyclable problem, and even the thing when things are being sent back, that because of expensive, so they are just trashed because it may cost too much money to unpack the return items and to put them back in the shelf, basically, that, and to check if they're okay. So that is something that where things are really going wrong in our society. There is one more question from Ellen. If Laudato Si was responsible for the Paris Agreement on climate change, would you know, Ryan, if it played a role in that?
Can you repeat the question? If what played a role?
Laudato Si was responsible for Paris Agreement on climate change. Oh, it's not a question. It's a statement from Mary Ellen Washienko.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Mary, if you would have a link on that, we would be definitely interested. Oh, she wrote a research paper on that.
Okay.
Mary Ellen, if we could have that research paper, if you would like to share it with us, we would be totally thrilled to have it, and also to share it with our network. I think that would be a great resource, Mary Ellen. That would, if we could have that, please share that with me, and then I will pass it on. Okay, now we are 5 minutes over time. We just wanted to go for 1 hour, but I hope you were all blessed with this conversation that we had, and we're very excited about your questions and your interactions, and hopefully you would love to join us again next time. Ryan, you still also want to say farewell to our visitors on Facebook and also on GoToWebinar?
Yeah, I just want to thank all of you for the generosity of your time, of listening to us, your commitment to the environment. And I just want to invite you to also pray for the conversion of all of our hearts so that we can become better stewards of the environment, and through that reconcile ourselves to God, to ourselves, to our brothers and sisters, and also with creation.
All right, that was a good way of closing it, Ryan. Thank you so much again to all of you for joining us today, and we'll keep you updated for our next dialogue and webinar, and I hope you will be joining us again. Have a blessed day, everybody.
God bless.
And God bless you. Bye-bye.